Welcome back. I'm Jim LaPierre. This is Sober Now. Today's topic is dry January. Let's talk about this growing trend. As always, very much welcome your comments and questions. Would love to hear from you. What's going on with you today? What's happening in your recovery? Drop us a comment or a like on any of the feeds that we have going today. If you haven't already been over to Sober Now's Facebook page, please head over and give that a quick like. It'll give you notifications about future live streams and other content that we're creating. Very happy to be streaming on Choose Help today, so welcome to folks over there. So let's jump into it. Dry January. It's a growing trend. It's been around for about 15 years now, and it's increasing. It's very common, actually. It coincides with the new year, which is a time where we traditionally see a lot of folks going into treatment, seeking out counseling, coaching, maybe checking out some 12-step programs. And there's a lot of important reasons for this. I think over the holidays, we kind of naturally take stock. We think about where we're at, where we've been, where we're going. We've just spent time with family and maybe gotten some important reminders about how addiction runs in the family, other types of dysfunction and unhealthiness that we see in ourselves and in the people that we love. And this is something that, motivates us to explore maybe making some changes. We make New Year's resolutions, most of which we don't keep, and the biggest reasons for that, we don't necessarily seek out or utilize support for the changes we're looking to make. We don't incorporate accountability for our goals, and we don't necessarily have a plan about specifically what are we going to do instead of drinking. What is it that's going to take the place of that? Alcohol is so much a part of our traditions and our socialization. It's kind of amazing to me how often I'm asked, how do you not drink? Which is kind of an insane question. How do you not do something? Well, you just don't do it. You don't go to the store, you don't purchase alcohol, you don't bring it home, you don't open it, you don't pour it into a glass, and you don't drink it. What the question really means is, what are you supposed to do instead? And for too many of us, the idea of being able to have fun completely sober or socializing without the use of alcohol is just unimaginable. For a lot of us, that's a product of social anxiety, or it's simply just what we're used to. So dry January is a short-term change. It's a 31 day challenge. Can I go this period of time without drinking? And what kind of changes do you notice in your life as you're going through that? What kind of goals do you have? Any period of abstinence from alcohol, of course, promotes physiological health, promotes mental health. There's so much to that. We forget, or we just don't think about the fact that, of course, alcohol is full of toxins. So as soon as you go more than a few days without drinking, your body begins detoxing, getting rid of all of those bad things it doesn't want. We forget that alcohol, of course, is a depressant, and so we very often notice improvements in our mood and our attitude. And we may even notice that we're more organized in our thinking. Our short-term memory improves. There's a lot of benefits that come from just not drinking. So again, this is a short-term commitment, so it's really manageable. It can, of course, lead to longer or greater change. It can lead to a lifestyle change. I've been really stoked to see growing social trends about what it means to be sober, what it means to be sober curious, and we'll touch on that a little bit more. I'm really grateful. This is the choice to abstain from alcohol is one of the very few things that I've done in my life really proactively. 17, 18 years ago, I started working with folks who were some in active addiction and some in addiction recovery, and I realized that the only meaningful difference between those folks and myself was that they drank more, they drank longer. And so even though I am not what our culture considers an alcoholic or addict, I am addicted to two substances. I'm addicted to nicotine and caffeine. But for the first time in my life, I made a proactive choice of seeing something that was a problem waiting to happen. And so I've been over 17 years now since I've consumed alcohol. I don't miss a thing about it. I enjoy some health benefits because of it, but more than anything, I recognize that I don't do many things in moderation. And so any substance, anything that is potentially addictive for me, is a problem waiting to happen. And I'm mindful of how that doesn't just apply to substances. It applies to any behavior, any hobby or pastime, anything that has an addictive quality to it. Someone near and dear to me once said, I can become addicted to anything that makes me feel better than I did a few minutes ago. And that's always stuck with me. We too often rely on and associate alcohol with fun. We call it liquid courage. We associate it as taking away inhibition and insecurities. The example that I usually use is I'm pretty sure that there's nothing in a margarita that makes a person want to sing karaoke. But after two or three of them, you can't get the microphone away from them. Obviously, there's nothing in alcohol that makes a person want to sing on stage. They already wanted to do that, but they were too inhibited sober, and all of a sudden, as soon as they've been drinking, they feel like this is something they can do. They feel like they have a socially acceptable reason for making a fool out of themselves. If they were to embarrass themselves, then of course we just excuse it and explain it away by saying, well, I was drunk. So the challenge that I often offer to folks is, well, what are your insecurities and inhibitions? To my way of thinking, inhibitions are fears that hold us back, and insecurities are reasons why we feel like we're not enough or we're too much. And what if we bring those out into the open and meaningfully explored them? What if we shared them with the people that know us well? Would they necessarily agree with our assessment of ourselves? Would they say that, yes, we ought to feel badly about those things, or we ought to be inhibited or self-limiting? Chances are no, but we have a tendency to project how we see ourselves and decide that other people must see us the same way. And this, of course, just compounds the inhibition. Breaking free of this is a pretty fantastic opportunity. The folks that I know who are the most fun, the most expressive, the most creative, virtually all of them are in recovery. And it's extraordinary to see how the transformation of recovery, which we need to differentiate from sobriety. Sobriety is awesome. It's a choice not to use, or a choice to, for others of us, a choice to engage in harm reduction or to limit our use. All of those are healthy pathways. But my experience is that recovery is creating a life that's so good that you wouldn't want to fuck it up with drugs or alcohol. Recovery is an ongoing process of transformation and change. The very best addictions counselor I ever worked with defined recovery as awareness of the attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that block change. Change, of course, is an inevitability. Growth is optional. Healing is optional. Becoming someone greater than we were, it remains optional. And so the choice to be sober is life-affirming. It is conducive to good health. It is financially beneficial. There's so many benefits to this. And the choice to make further improvements in your life that are built upon sobriety and the things that being sober makes possible, potentially create a far greater quality of life, allows us to pursue passions, pursue dreams, not just be goal-oriented, but to allow ourselves to work towards things that maybe we can accomplish. So this is what my friends in 12-step programs refer to as a newfound freedom. Allowing ourselves to be more genuine, be more expressive. Noticing that in the past, alcohol or drugs had this feeling of liberating us. But for people like myself, the substance that liberates us, or even the addictive experience that seems to liberate us, eventually enslaves us. So there's a number of questions that I pose to people when they're considering doing something like Dry January. The first one is this the first time that you've quote-unquote gone on the wagon? Have you had periods of abstinence in the past? What was that like for you? Did you experience a benefit? And also, let's look at, why did you make that choice? Were you becoming concerned about your use of alcohol? Did you just want to try something new and decide to take on this challenge? Have you questioned whether or not alcohol is a problem? My experience, unfortunately, is that by the time a person is wondering whether or not alcohol is a problem for them, it typically is. And there's a few things to consider there. If you have been wondering, this is probably not the first time. You've probably been wondering for some time. And if you're wondering, pretty good chance it's a problem. But the good news is, whether you're an alcoholic or not, whether you're somebody who has a problem with alcohol or not, you're still free to not drink. Again, you don't have to wait for it to be a problem. But I also will ask, have friends, family, people close to you express concerns about your drinking? Has alcohol caused problems for you at work, in your parenting, in relationships, or any other part of your life? Just things to consider. I've been really kind of entertained and amazed to watch being sober curious, quote unquote, was a growing social media trend prior to the pandemic. And we had reached this point. This is fascinating to me. In 2019, the Nielsen Group did, of course, they're always doing research, but they found that 54% of Americans had determined that they planned to reduce their use of alcohol in the coming year. And that's a high percentage, but even higher, millennials responding to that survey came in at around 66%. So this is something that increasingly had our attention. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. And what we have experienced over the course of the pandemic is that use of alcohol has increased significantly, use of illicit drugs have increased significantly, and unfortunately, everything that is unhealthy in our society has been compounded by the pandemic. Overdose rates have skyrocketed, a lot of things that are really concerning. So my hope is that as we acclimate to everything we've been experiencing for the past 2 years, that we can return to the idea of being sober curious and how it can benefit our lives to be free of alcohol. There's been a number of other trends that have been growing, and in recent years, Sober September has actually gained some momentum, as have other challenges that are about holistic health, but oftentimes also include the idea that we not drink during that period of time. There's been a proliferation of sober bars in major metropolitan areas, and that too has gained momentum. Millennials, young people, are the target demographic for these, but they provide us with opportunities for socializing, dancing, meeting potential dating partners without the use of alcohol. Mocktails are actually the drink of choice in sober bars. They contain all of the ingredients of our favorite cocktails, they just without the alcohol. So I'm hoping that trend is here to stay. I'm hoping it gains momentum. I'm mindful of all of the ways in which alcohol consumption is ingrained in our pastimes, our holidays, our traditions. I'm also mindful that it's expected. Alcohol and caffeine are unique from all other substances in this way, that not only are they socially sanctioned, despite the fact that they're objectively unhealthy, despite the fact that they are scientifically drugs, they're condoned and they're expected. A person who doesn't consume coffee, tea, energy drinks is somebody that we look at like there must be something a little bit odd about them, because we expect adults to have at least one beverage that contains caffeine on a daily basis. And we don't really consider that as chemical dependency, but of course it is. Alcohol is the one other substance that it's unique. Why we never ask people, why don't you smoke cigarettes? Why don't you try heroin? We are very expectant that people will use alcohol. And for folks in recovery, we quite often are put in the position of being asked, why don't we? And uh, for some of us, that's an easy question to answer, and for some of us, it's quite hard. Uh, you don't owe anyone an explanation, certainly, as to why you choose to abstain from alcohol. Some of my favorite responses that I've heard over the years, a number of people near and dear to me will say, I'm allergic to alcohol. Every time I drink it, I break out in handcuffs. I have folks who will explain that they have a medical condition and not explain what that is. I know folks who will say, well, I'm on medication that prevents me. There's no wrong answer. There's no explanation that has to be given. It's always interesting to me that when I'm in a social setting and asked why I don't drink, I'll explain that I don't do anything else in moderation, and so that I choose not to. But at some point in the evening, I will excuse myself to go outside and smoke a cigarette, and the person who's drinking is standing there with their cocktail looking at me saying, don't you know that's bad for you? And I'll kind of laugh and gesture towards their drink and say, yes, you have your poison, I have mine. It's interesting and terrible to me that not only does our culture condone the use of alcohol, but that our own government, and in the research that we do in the U.S., alcohol is separated from all other drugs. In fact, the terminology that we most often use is alcohol and other drugs. And there is absolutely no scientific, no objective reason whatsoever to separate it from illicit drugs or prescription drugs. But this is what we do. I think we're uncomfortable acknowledging that it is an addictive substance, that it is easily abused, that of course it does damage to countless people every year. It's also interesting to me to consider that I think most folks in our culture have an awareness that we have been in an opioid epidemic for a number of years now. But what's lost in that consideration is that alcohol has been at epidemic levels for well over 100 years in our country. For all of the horrible loss of life, health consequences, all of the negative things that come with the use of opioids and other illicit drugs, alcohol does more damage every year. It creates more fatalities, it creates more negative health outcomes, it creates more loss in every aspect of our society. But it is something that is not only condoned, but again, is expected. So I'm going to be wrapping up shortly. I want to, as always, be a resource to you. If you are, whether you're in recovery or not, whether you identify as an alcoholic or addict or not, if your goal is to improve your health and your quality of life in the coming year, that is absolutely fantastic, and I'm happy for you that you're making that choice. It is life-affirming, and it creates possibilities. Particularly during the pandemic, I think we need to step back and examine what are the things that I'm using to cope, what is healthy in my life, what are the relationships in my life that I'm nurturing, and what are the things that are harmful to me, and what is it that I'm willing to do about those. Just an opportunity to step back and get a fresh perspective, get some outside input. Regardless of where you are in the journey, I can share with you that I have found great value in identifying exploring and externalizing insecurities and inhibitions. I've seen hundreds or thousands of lives transformed, both personally and professionally, and I'm always rooting for people who want something better. They don't want to settle for the life that they have. They don't want to be a slave to a substance. They want to be healthier. They want to have a better quality of life. I think all of us want that. Pursuing that is an act of courage. It is life affirming. And so I invite you to take stock and consider what it is that you want at this juncture and what it is that you're willing to do to get it. I also always urge folks, please don't do this alone. Life is hard, and even harder in the midst of a pandemic. So let's look meaningfully at the level of support in your life. Let's look at what will you do instead of drinking? How will you seek fun without the use of substances? And what have you seen work for other people? So, always invite you to connect with me. Jim@sobernow.com is the quickest and easiest way to do that. Would love to answer questions for you, and would love to hear topics that you'd like to have covered in future live streams. Would invite you to check out Sober Now's YouTube channel. Well over 100 videos on different aspects of recovery, completely free, accessible there. If you like the channel, you'll get, again, notifications of future live streams and other content. And of course, we'd love for you to check out our website. SoberNow.com is a subscription service. It's eminently affordable at under $15 a month. And the site will get you access to 2 different home study programs that you can do at your own pace with complete anonymity and complete confidentiality. The first program is for those who are seeking to enhance their recovery from addiction, and the second program is for people like myself who identify as affected others, those of us who have loved ones in active addiction or maybe early recovery, because of course addiction doesn't just affect the person in active use, it affects everyone around them, and especially everyone who loves them. So please check out those resources. I'll look forward to joining you again real soon, and please take excellent care of yourself.